Counting down. Hey, we're live.
Hey, we're live. Awesome.
Welcome to episode 2, everybody. We are live. Unfortunately, Josh Heath had to cancel on us today, so we're going to change gears a little bit and talk about something that kind of took the heathen internet airwaves by storm.
And that's Iceland. Specifically, the flack that the group in Iceland is getting from American heathens.
All right, so we're going to have to work on this dead air thing because we are bad at this game. We are really bad at this game.
So we'll start.
We cut 20 minutes out last time
Yeah.
for the archive.
Yeah. Just in case you don't know, my name is Lauren Thacker, a.k.a. That's Not Nice, and that's a geology joke for those of you who spell it wrong all the time.
And it's
Gosh.
not Genesis.
Yeah, I am not Phil Collins.
Well, that's what your name is saying, right? That's not Genesis.
Yes, exactly.
Fair enough.
So if,
Josh, I'm also known as a narco-heathen. You should all know who I am. And this guy is someone else.
I am Torin. I think those of you that know me on the sub, that's pretty obviously my screen name as well. So I don't think that requires much more introduction.
No, but those windchimes need an introduction.
Don't they? Don't they? I'll be going back inside shortly. That is a fight that I have had and lost with my wife.
You had a fight with your wife. Of course you lost.
Hey, now.
Hey, I have a reasonable wife. Sometimes I win.
He just
No, you
decided. He just decided he'd rather be happy than right.
Well, I can be both. I decide I'd rather be happy than have her also be right, if that makes sense. So, in order to avoid some more dead air, I'm going to go ahead and recap anybody who isn't familiar with the system or with the subject, but since they might have been under a rock for the last week. Many of you are familiar with the fact that Iceland is building themselves a temple, which is fantastic news for the Icelanders. It's been a subject on our on the Reddit sub for quite some time until we finally got tired of it and told people to stop talking about it.
Rightly so.
Rightly so, because honestly, it's wonderful that their tribe is getting a temple, and but there's only so much discussion that we need to have about it, especially since there, as far as I know, aren't any of their tribe on our sub. One or two Icelanders, I'm not sure if any of them are actually part of that group or not. None of them have actually mentioned it. But moving on from that, because at least for the moment, the subject isn't whether or not we care about the Icelanders temple. The subject is the reaction that has happened recently amongst non-Icelandic heathens, and as far as we can tell, primarily American heathens, to the Icelanders and their temple, and the hate mail they're allegedly receiving over it. Josh, you might know a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when I read the article, it seemed that the Icelandic, I don't know how to pronounce the name of their organization, but their tribe has come out and fought for the right to perform same-sex marriages and fought for same-sex couples in Iceland to have the right to get married. And for some reason, what seems to be a predominantly American Esoteric following has decided that this is bad. Bad pagans.
Let's also remember that they have come out and very publicly said that anyone can practice Esoteric. That is their stance, is that you don't have to be of any particular ancestry to become Esoteric. Now, you have to live in Iceland to be a part of the Icelandic Esoteric Association, but as far as their stance is a very open one compared to many American heathens.
Well, and it seems to be a stance that's pretty popular with us among the subreddit, where we're very tribalistic. As long as you're willing to adopt the heathen culture, and in particular the culture of the tribe you're looking to join, you're welcome. It doesn't matter, where your great-great-granddaddy comes from. All that matters is that you are heathen.
Exactly, and that seems to be the prevalent one of the subreddit, but maybe not even necessarily the prevalent idea everywhere. And that, I think part of that just comes from groups you tend to flock around people who generally believe the same way you do. There's only so many times that you guys can completely eviscerate someone for being stupid and they'll stop coming back.
Well, that's the way we prefer it, is that they just stop coming back, because if we ban them, then somebody comes in and talks about how we're censoring and controlling everybody.
My free speech! Oh no!
No roads!
So, the thing about the alleged hate mail that bothers me the most, and I really just want to go straight into this, because as far as I'm concerned, everything about it boils down to this, is what right does anybody have to tell somebody else how to behave in their own house?
Now, to be fair, this is heathenry, and we are really good at you're doing it wrong.
Well, see, and that's a good distinction that needs to be made, there's you're doing it wrong, and there's the I'm going to come into your house and force you to do it right. There's a huge difference there. And as anybody who frequents the Reddit sub is going to know, none of us on the moderator team have ever shied away from saying the Icelanders are doing it wrong.
It's true.
In fact, we've gotten a lot of flack from a few people here and there just for the amount of times that we say the Icelanders are doing it wrong. But we will stand up for their right to do it however the hell they want in their own place.
And see, that's where I've differed with you guys before on that, is that I think that to a certain degree, I would rather heathenry be more like Iceland than the white supremacist wasteland that happens sometimes in flyover country.
There is a middle ground.
Yeah, you don't live around here. To be
Well,
fair,
you don't have to live around there.
To be fair, it would be, we do have white supremacy issues here that have nothing to do with heathenry, but that's just Arkansas.
Well, and we get the same thing, of course, in Cascadia. We are one of the whitest places in the country, above and beyond anything you're going to find down in the South or even the Midwest. How we had laws protecting our whiteness up until the early 20th century.
I think Oregon changed its laws in like the 1960s or something like that.
No, I believe it was the late 20s. And I only know this because I was listening to something about it on the radio recently. I knew about the laws, but I didn't realize the dates until just a day or two ago. But the point being, yeah, we well into the 20th century, way after the Civil War, way after this wasn't supposed to be as much of a problem, this region had laws against black people even settling here.
Yeah.
And to this day, especially if you get into the more eastern reaches of Cascadia, you find it a bastion for white supremacists.
Well, there are entire neighborhoods in Portland that are just that.
Right, and don't get me started on the northern tip of Idaho.
Oh, yeah.
The National Redoubt.
Yeah, that's Mecca right there. Only
Hey.
don't call it that because I'll get angry.
I live in not too far from where like the big billboards were up for white pride and all over, and there's one maybe 30 miles up the interstate from my house for some sort of white nationalist radio. So yeah, I can empathize.
Hey, while we're trotting out our white supremacy cred, y'all got the billboards out y'all's way.
Yes.
Out here, we've got the quiet ones with compounds, lots of guns, and supplies to last a century.
We have some of those too. Oddly enough,
To be
most
fair.
of those, yeah. most of those
Everyone out here has compounds with lots of guns. So,
well, that's because in Cascadia, everyone knows you have a right to use your guns to protect your gay married pot plants.
See, I'm hoping the more that pot progresses, the less I have to worry about the people that have the compounds and the guns. Because you never hear
fill out.
You never hear of somebody high on pot deciding to go shoot up a mall. You never hear about somebody high on pot going to rob a bank.
I've tried to explain that to some people before, that, about as violent as I've ever seen anybody on pot get is turning to their wife and saying, "Bitch, get me some chips."
Well, I think we've strayed a little bit from talking about the Icelanders.
So Iceland.
Well, see that. Yeah, I was going to say. Hopefully, Lauren, you have something to actually stretch this topic out, because I think I've said about as much as I can in the subject, which is really everybody that is sending those hate mails needs to shut the hell up and realize that it is none of their damn business what the Icelanders do in the Icelanders' home.
Well, I think there's a point to be made here, because when the Gothi of that tribe came out and he said some things that most American heathens completely disagreed with, we all stood up and very loudly said, "You don't represent us." And now there's this backlash where people seem to think that you don't represent us unless you're doing this, in which case you do, so stop doing it.
I guess the thing to me right now with it is just, I feel that the problem that we're seeing, which really doesn't matter who we're talking about, which group, the issue comes into play that America seems to think it holds some sort of moral superiority, and what we lead and the world follows, and whether that's heathenry or that's
classic American exceptionalism.
Exactly, and I think that is part of this problem, is that we seem to think that we are, by virtue of being Americans, doing it right.
Well, I think another part of the problem is that Americans have a bad habit of, everybody has a bad habit of bringing their Christian baggage to this religion, to heathenry in general. But the particular fashion in which the Americans do it is to pretend they're not, and pretend they have no Christian baggage while trying to bring conservative Christian morals to the religion. Because I don't think that there are too many people out there that would argue that, in general, and I say this with a lowercase c, heathenry is a conservative religion. And as such, it tends to attract people occasionally that have uppercase C conservative values. In America, at any rate.
Yeah, because I will say that it seems to be a bit different in Europe versus here. In America, I would argue that it definitely, you get a lot more big C and libertarian folks.
Absolutely, you do. I think that that is a trend that's starting to wane, finally, but it's certainly true.
Well, it comes down to, and I've had this conversation extensively with someone else, it comes down to the fact that people are starting to realize that heathenry is not a individualistic faith or religion. It's very much a communal thing. There's been the phrase, I've tossed it around on the sub, without a tribe, you are literally nothing. You have nothing. You can't get worth. So without a tribe, you're stuck. You're done.
That's very true, and I think that you could probably lump some of this together into the general concept of the death throes of an ideology within heathenry. I say death throes, that implies that it's way closer to being dead than it really is. Maybe the gunshot that's ultimately going to kill this particular ideology is what we're hearing. But essentially, we're starting to see the death of the individualistic, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm sorry. You just said it a minute ago. Ayn Rand would have loved it.
Libertarianism?
Libertarian, thank you. The individualistic libertarian heathen is starting to go away. And it's because they're largely starting to confront a community that realizes that we are a tribal religion. We are a religion that lives by its community, for its community, and we are without worth if we don't have a community. Sorry, go ahead.
And that's hard for me as someone who does not have an active community right now. But you're absolutely right. I'm in a situation right now where I live, the community is very small, and most people don't have that community mindset yet. So it can be very difficult to try to develop that. But at the same time, my belief in community is what keeps me involved in what would be considered classically liberal things like community activism, working with volunteering, working with social programs.
Right. Well, and go ahead, Josh.
For the heathen, your community isn't necessarily just the people who believe as you do. It's the people, it's your family, it's the people around you who are as close as family. Your heathen community is important. You need people to practice your religion with, but community is much more than that. There was an episode of Raven Radio where somebody mentioned that the biggest compliment they get is being mistaken for a good Christian because of all the help they do in their community.
Yeah.
And I think, doing the volunteering and things like that, that is heathen. You were helping your community and building worth within it.
Right. That's a really good point, because I was going to say, Lauren, I wasn't trying to say at all that you were worthless, and I don't think that Josh would have said the same thing either. We've just got evidence just from earlier, having a pre-show discussion. You have family who obviously sees enough worth in you to do the work they've done for you.
Absolutely. And it's a situation where it can be hard for, when you hear this community, it can be hard for heathens in flyover states, people who feel isolated, to get that idea between, well, my community is more than just other heathens. At the same time, also, just because someone else is a heathen doesn't make them your community.
Right. Which is something that we occasionally have to remind people of on the sub. The entire concept of this is not an online kindred. This is not a community for you. This is the best description we've ever used. It's a marketplace of ideas. It's a place for different heathens to come together, trade words, and see what happens.
We're our little online trade village.
Exactly. If you want to go all ancient heathen on you, there's a lot of times where different tribes wouldn't have any contact with each other outside of that sort of situation. And I'm sure that there were bits of crossover here and there between tribes because of that. But outside of that, my fjord obviously does it better than your valley, and that's just the objective truth of the matter.
That's pretty much it. Except you're in Seattle and therefore wrong.
I'm going to leave that one alone.
Oh.
So we've kind of hit on some points here where we've very well established that if you were sending hate mail to the Icelanders, you need to knock your shit off. And we've also established that there's a place for this tribal right to do things, as we would say, you have a right to do things wrong within your own tribe.
Right.
Well, a good example that people, I guess a more Americanized example would be a lot of the more I can't say it right. A lot of the kindreds that have been established for, say, 10, 20 years use the hammer right. Now, you can get heathens all kinds of argument about that, but the fact of the matter is, it's something that they have made into tradition because they've used it for so long. Therefore, they have every right to do it, even if you think the hammer right is dumb.
As much as I hate to admit it, you're absolutely right on that. I would never allow the hammer right in my own tribe, but it does have a certain validity to it as a tradition at this point. When it was introduced, people didn't know that it was wrong. And honestly, even something wrong, if done for the right reasons for long enough, sort of becomes right.
Well, and it becomes right for that people, for that tribe.
Exactly.
It may not be right for your tribe, but for whichever group is using it, it is absolutely the right tradition for them because it is their tradition.
Right. It would definitely be wrong for my tribe because the Hammerite and the knowledge that the Hammerite was wrong predates my tribe. So the idea that my tribe would be incorporated would be willful ignorance.
But you've got plenty of tribes that started in the 90s or the 80s even.
And for them, I as much as I'll look at them and be, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing that, I have to stop and think for a second and realize that when they started doing that, it was what we knew. It was what we thought we knew.
Well, I mean, I can't think of how many times I have come to the defense of the 70s and 80s era kind of Esoteric pioneers of the revival, because up until the 80s and even into the 90s and beyond, you had the witch cult of Western Europe taught as fact in universities. And even though that's been pretty easily debunked with archaeological evidence, our Esoteric and heathen forefathers, foremothers, the folks in the 70s and 80s didn't have the internet. They didn't have the resources. They didn't have Amazon. I can't even think of, I wouldn't know half what I know if it weren't for the books on my Kindle.
Well, it's I think that just goes to illustrate the point that I'm pretty sure at this point we're all in agreement on, is that, really you always have to work with what you have. And there comes a certain point when you would do more damage to your tribe by trying to excise something that you now know to be fiction, because you're trying to excise what, regardless of its origins, is now a tradition. And there are some things that here and there with different people from the earlier days of Esoteric are better off excising anyway. But things like that don't really affect anything one way or the other, definitely not.
Now, I do have to ask, because this does bring up a point that someone brought up to me after listening to the podcast last week, is we do kind of go into, even to tie back into the Iceland thing, we do see a lot of problem with kind of that Christian baggage of we're going to replace Jesus with Odin or Thor. I see Thor more than Odin, but we'll go either way. We're going to become super anal retentive. It must be from a book, and the older the book, the better. Edda beaters. I'm going to say we have culture of the Teuton beaters. I have experienced them.
Well, yeah, absolutely, but I would say that there's a decent backing behind being a culture of the Teutons beater compared to an Edda beater.
But at the same time, at what point do we start to get rid of experiential versus what's in the historical? I guess for me, I worry that if we get too stuck in it absolutely, this, that, and the other, and not try to move forward, that's when you get the things like the people who are so vehemently against gay marriage. Because they look and say, oh, well, back then they were against gay marriage, so clearly it's wrong.
Well, if I can, sorry, go ahead, Josh.
I think there's an important distinction to be made in that there are different, just like with any religion, you have people who are very scholarly. I love to dissect old books, and yet Forvern makes me look like I just graduated kindergarten. And then there are people who are very much experiential and want to learn naturally through joining a tribe. And the object of any good teacher would be to balance the two. And I think that's why you hear so often on the subreddit and even on Facebook groups that I've been in, you need to learn certain things in real life from real people. You
Absolutely.
can't learn things from a book all the time, and you definitely can't trust some Joe Schmo on the internet because there's no accountability there.
Oh my goodness, the number of self-proclaimed Gothies on Facebook is too high.
Well, you know, I've always found that 9 times out of 10, the way you can find a real Gothie is when you call them one and they go, ah. They just sigh and they try not to accept it. But one thing I was going to say about your culture, the Teutons beaters, is that there is a term here that I'm going to borrow from my military days called mission creep. Are you familiar with the idea?
No.
Mission creep is basically when you start out with an objective and you start out with a way to accomplish that objective, and you start to continue down the way of accomplishing it while what you're trying to accomplish slowly changes. It'd be the idea of, we go to war with this country because they did something bad, and then as we get the people that did the bad things, we continue to go to war there, because coming up with a million different justifications for it until we can try to finally make them into a tiny little America. That would be
we never do that.
We never do that because
No.
we are not imperialists. Repeat after me: we are not imperialists. So where that is important to this discussion is that to try to point out the importance of you need to go read books like Culture of the Teutons is a good way to accomplish a particular objective. That particular objective being able to get some cultural context of the people from which this religion sprang. You need to understand the way our forefathers thought. You need to understand from their perspective what frith was, what luck was, what worth was, etc., etc. But then you start to see the mission creep of, well, now we need to start doing it exactly the way they did it.
Yes.
And that's the problem, is you go from understanding how they thought to not being able to think for yourself. That's the mission creep, and that's when you go from being somebody who recommends, rightly so, that you should read a book like Culture of the Teutons to somebody who is substituting Culture of the Teutons for another Bible.
And that, I think, of course, then am always first to argue that should not be the first book you give people to tackle.
No. That should.
As much as I see people recommend it first, that book is while it is one of the most accessible books I have ever read that was written by an academic scholar in 1903, it was still written by an academic scholar in 1903. And if you're not the type of person who's readily and easily able to parse that stuff, it's not where you should be starting.
I'm just going to state for the record, I couldn't read through it till I got back on my ADHD medication. So.
Well, that's partly because I do have to say that Grunbeck does tend to beat each subject until it is a little puddle of goo just to make sure you understand it. And there have been times where I have to force myself not to skim when I read that book.
See, that's why I always go for
the chapter on frith.
I always go for Gods and Myths of Northern Europe. That's personally where I send people first.
I can't say I'm familiar with it.
It's Davison, Ellis Davison.
Okay. Honestly, and this is going to sound absolutely terrible, but the place I've been sending people first is Patricia LaFalve's A Practical Heathen's Guide to Esoteric.
I really like that book, and I think as far as a mass market 101 book, I think that's probably as good as it's going to get.
Exactly, and I don't even refer to that book as 101. That's more prep course stuff. That's
heathenry.
That's what you read because you're getting ready to take your GED. It is definitely not something that gives anybody a really great basis into heathenry. Hahowever, what it does do is give people an overview of heathenry as though it were one big happy family. It mixes a lot of stuff up, and there are a few things in it I disagree with, but as far as any of the basic level heathen books, I disagree with it less than the others.
I just want to say that back in my day, you just got handed a copy of Saga of the Icelanders and told to deal with it.
That's pretty much how it was when I got started too, and it's not necessarily the best thing, because then you get saga beaters.
Yeah, I have experienced that. But the thing is that I do like about this. Once again, I'm using the word community in a colloquial sense, folks. Don't get on my case.
Marketplace, damn it.
Marketplace. But no, just the general. My experience has been that people are willing to challenge you on ideas. Now, you do run into, sometimes things turn into an echo chamber. Sometimes. But for the most part, if you can back up what you're saying, somebody may not necessarily agree with you, but they're not going to just completely treat you like you're, I don't know, coming in and trying to tell everybody that you're married to Loki.
Yeah, that's not going to go well for you on our sub. But yeah, okay, the echo chamber does happen occasionally. However, I would counter that by saying that it's not necessarily the classic echo chamber.
Yeah, because it's definitely different from, like, say, if you're in some of the big numbered also true groups on Facebook, or on, the level of discourse is different. And I've come on the sub and said that before. I'm grateful for you guys because we can have a conversation.
Right. And I would say a lot of the echo chamber stuff comes up just because there are a number of voices on the sub that have become respected voices, if you will. We've beat the dead horse of don't come in here swinging it like you own the place until you have a reputation that can back it up.
We're one of the few pages on Reddit that actually does have a reputation-based posting.
Right. And you will get told to take a fucking walk if you come in there and try to pretend like you can hang with the big dogs when nobody knows who the hell you are. And but I get into that because what you tend to see happen a lot of times is the echo chamber starts when you get people in there, when you get the respective voices all happening to agree on something at the same time, which does occasionally happen, more frequently among the mod group than anybody else, but occasionally we'll get the mod group and then a number of the other respective voices all happen to agree on the same thing, and then, when everybody who's got the highest levels of respect are agreeing, that kind of turns into that. Hold on one second. I will be right back.
Now, Josh, if you can, because I kind of want to have you maybe explain a little bit more by what you meant as far as the reputation-based on Reddit. Not only because, basically because we do have people that listen that are not involved with Reddit at all, really have no idea what we're talking about. So if you could elaborate further, that would be great.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we lost 2 viewers when I started talking about Reddit.
Come back.
Also, sorry, speaking of coming back, I'm back. I had to let my wife know there was no gas in my car, so she probably shouldn't take it.
We don't want a stranded wife. That would be bad.
We almost had a stranded me on the way home. Traffic got so bad, but I'm sorry I kind of interrupted what was going on there.
It's all good. So what I meant was Reddit operates on a basis of upvotes. The more votes you get, the more visible your post is. However, when you come over to our Also True, what you end up seeing is we don't upvote a lot. Unless you say something incredibly poignant, we just don't toss around upvotes. But you will see people who are consistent contributors, who are intelligent contributors, and occasionally who don't mind stirring the pot. You'll see that they start to get more recognition. People will name drop them in a post to get their attention, and they have recognizability.
Right.
If I go on and post something, most people in the forum, even before I was a mod, knew who was saying it and knew that there was some value to what I was saying, even if they disagreed with me, which happens rather frequently.
Right.
But
well,
if there's
we do have a number of people like that. I mean, even ones that have been gone for a while. You know, we recently had Thorbjorn come back, and some of the disagreements between Thorbjorn and various other people on the sub have been famous, but we all value him. As even when we disagree with him, he's a very intelligent individual. His arguments are usually very well founded and very well thought out, and as a result, people know what to expect from him, and they know that they're expecting something that is not dribble.
Well,
despite being disagreed with often.
Right. We've had our various mythic wars on the internet. You know, there was the Wicca War of 2014.
Yeah.
You know what? I used to apologize for that, and now I don't.
The thing is I'm not entirely sure that Wicca knew what was going on.
Oh, they did. Believe me, they so did.
And Torin, you were completely to blame for that, for Ask a Heathen. You really are.
I absolutely know, and that's why I said I used to apologize, and now I don't. I just think it was hilarious. And honestly, I think a lot of good came out of it in the end. As much flaming as went on during the course of it, I've noticed a lot more even-handed and pleasant interactions between the heathens and the Wiccans, whether it be on r/Wicca or r/Pagan. And I've even noticed here and there some of them will defer to us on matters of heathenry.
You know, and I'm going to say this as someone who studied at a Wiccan seminary, who was involved with Wiccan groups. Not all Wiccans are what we stereotypically think of Wiccans as. And
oh, absolutely not.
At the same token, they think we're all a bunch of Rosatu Viking reenactors, so it is kind of an even trade.
There's a Wiccan on the Osatrue lore boards who I got along really well with. Her username was Aponia.
Yeah.
And
oh yeah, she shows up on. I believe she's one of the moderators at r/Wicca, and she does occasionally show up on the Esoteric sub.
She is one of the most knowledgeable people I have met on the internet, and when it comes to Wicca, I always defer to her. I just do.
Well, honestly,
I really hope it's a her.
I'm pretty sure it is. I had a lot of good interactions with her back during the great Heathen-Wiccan War, because she was one of the people that actually thought it would be a valuable thing for me to post about Ask a Heathen on r/Wicca. And she was one of our staunchest allies when all the flame wars started. I have great respect for her.
Now, one thing I kind of want to say, because I think one of the biggest issues that you see with heathenry and Wicca, or I'm going to speak and say broader, reconstructionists versus neo-pagans, is that there is a language barrier. Where there are phrases, words we use and they use, but we mean two different things.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. I don't think that is really the biggest thing that starts the fighting. I think what starts the fighting is the concept of cultural appropriation meets negative reaction, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Not necessarily the Wiccans, but the Eclectics tend to, it's a lot of them, and I'm going to try not to be insulting here. I'm doing my best. I really promise I am. It's a concept, and I'm not even saying all Eclectics, but there is a concept that I refer to as magpie religion. It's ooh, that's shiny, I'll take some of that. Ooh, that's shiny, I'll take some of that.
I have a friend that calls that the Chinese buffet of religion. I'll have some of that, some of that, some of that, and an egg roll.
Yeah, but the difference there is at least usually that's all Chinese food.
You've once again, I can tell you've never been to Arkansas.
Oh, I could introduce you to a buffet up here that sells apple pie and fried chicken, and yet it's a Chinese buffet. It's fantastic.
We once had a Chinese/Mexican buffet here in Little Rock.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It was. It really was. It was like
I,
bad
uh,
Chinese food and bad Mexican food.
I suppose while we're being honest, we should point out that the vast, vast, vast majority of Chinese buffets, the country over, do not actually serve Chinese food. They sell deep fried chicken with orange food dye on it.
Americanized.
And I
Very
love
much Americanized.
that deep fried chicken with orange food dye.
I prefer the
much.
deep fried chicken with the reddish food dye on it. I think they call it General Tso's. The sarcasm is thick today. Anyways, what I was getting to, so you have the magpie religion. They take a little bit here, a little bit there from different places. Reconstructionist religions tend to be the ones that react negatively to that. Specifically, I would say more than any of the other recon religions, heathens react negatively to that because we place so much importance on the cultural context of our beliefs. To the point where, if you want to screw around with the runes, you need to understand the culture they came from. You need to understand what they are from a cultural point of view. If you want to do any of this, it needs to have its cultural trappings. We believe that if you remove elements individually away from the greater culture, that you're essentially bastardizing it and making it into a grotesque imitation.
And it's the same issue you see with the Americanizing of a lot of indigenous religious beliefs, not just heathenry, but you see this with Native American, Buddhism. You even are seeing this with people who are coming in and trying to appropriate Egyptian deity and belief and trying to put a veneer of politicism with it.
Right. But sorry, I got distracted myself for a minute. Is that when it comes down to it, with the our visceral reaction to the cultural appropriation or the appropriation of bits and pieces of our religion leads to us usually wording our objections rather strongly. Even when we think we're being polite about it, we think we're being polite but firm, heathens are a little bit rough in conversation, and a lot of the different heathen communities value that as a way of communication. Is that I'm going to step on your toes, and you need to put steel-toe boots on if you have a problem with that. The problem is when we try to communicate that way with people who are not amongst our culture. And what we end up with is the eclectics doing something in complete innocence that pisses us off righteously, and us expressing our righteous indignation in a strong manner, which then they react negatively to, which just turns into an escalating flame war.
Well, I will say this. I think that part of the maturity of this movement has been that we react like that less and less on a whole. Where somebody brought up in a group that I'm in, how do you feel about the Marvel portrayal of the Norse gods?
I have seen that come up so many times, and I am so tired of saying, it's Marvel, get over it.
Yeah. I'd say the answer is almost universally, it's a work of fiction and a rather entertaining one.
Dead horses and all. But, but it's this, or these questions come up, and there are people who are just pissed about it, just get so angry about. And then that can kind of spiral into people getting mad about pop culture paganism. And I'm like, where do you find all this energy to get that angry? But, 5-10 years ago, I would have been that incensed. I feel like as I've grown in my heathenry, I'm just less and less. I just don't care, really. I mean, I just care less and less and I pick my battles more.
I've found that the more energy you put into becoming heathen and adopting a heathen mindset, the less energy you have to be pissed off at the Christians for killing the elder heathens 1,000 years ago by the thousands, or the Christians of today being upset that there are heathens of today. The more you work at being heathen, the more you work at getting into that mindset, the less important it is for you to get pissy with every little thing, like the fact that Heimdall is black in the Marvel Universe.
Oh, guys, I remember the uproar about that in certain parts of the community.
Oh,
Even
when
people.
Thor
Oh
became a
yeah.
woman? Ah.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so let me just explain to all of you heathens that are not also comic book nerds. Thor doesn't become a woman. Thor does something which makes him lose the ability to use Mjolnir. Another person is deemed worthy who happens to be a woman. So there is no gender reassignment, none of that. It's simply that the mantle, the name Thor, is passed on to someone else. It's not that Thor became a woman. And I just feel like I need to say this all the time because you can't believe the number of heathen events I've been to where that comes up, and somebody also wants to pull it back to the liberal agenda. And I'm like, no, you obviously don't read comic books.
Well, when it comes down to it, if I can watch an entertaining comic book movie and see form-fitting armor with nipples on at the same time, I'm not going to complain.
Why would you bring the third Batman movie into this? I mean, come on.
Nipples on a bat suit.
I would also like to point out, in that vein, not only is Thor female in the sense that the title moved on, but there is a whole Thor core, which includes a horse and a frog. So y'all need to get the hell over it.
Oh
Yeah.
man, it's a comic
Well,
book.
should we even mention the fact that Thor's an alien?
Do we want to get mad that Thor hangs out with Squirrel Girl too? Because I'll fight you over that one.
And then you got to get into the fact that Thor is not only an alien in Marvel, but in the Stargate universe, Thor is
Yeah.
an alien whose ship is named Mjolnir. I mean, come on.
And
Let's pick our battles here, folks.
He's a little 4-foot-tall, ball-headed gray dude. It's...
I'm waiting to see that as an idol pop up on someone's altar.
You had to invoke that, didn't you?
I did. I want to see it so bad you don't even know.
I give it a week before that picture shows up on the sub.
Okay, so if you happen to have this, you can certainly put up a picture. You could also put it on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Heathen Talk, or you can send it to us on Twitter, at Heathen_Talk. We want to see this. And now that we've put it out there, someone's going to do it.
I will put it on the next podcast. I will.
Oh. I'm totally, oh man. That is just, well, I mean, I guess considering I have seen altars that had the comic, like little comic baubles on them, so sure, why not?
Well, I've seen
well,
plenty of people
it wasn't...
wearing the actual Marvel Mjolnir as a pendant, and you do.
It wasn't that long ago that there was a beer stein hat on Odin, so anything's possible. We didn't react well to that poor guy.
Oh man, they're just.
Hey,
they mean
if
well.
I can have a potted vey, he can have a desk vey, I guess.
Yeah, well, the difference is one of you no longer has a potted vey.
That's true. In fact,
Oy vey.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to correct the Lord of the Potted Vey.
Seriously, because, oh man, I'm sorry, I just find this so, but the thing is that at least people out there are trying something. With your potted vey, yes, you were wrong, and you were completely doing it wrong, but at least you were trying, which is more, something.
Well, and there was an important lesson learned in that. I tried to have a potted vey, which means I tried to give the divine a place to live within my home. And there's an innocence that came along with that. I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't aware of the scope of what I was dealing with.
The fire was pretty and you wanted to touch it.
Right. And as I learned my lesson, I learned that that wasn't the right way to go about this. And so I adjusted my praxis to fit the reality of the situation. And I've tried to make that a lesson for newer heathens to learn from. Whether that's working or not is yet to be seen. But
I will say this religious path does tend to attract some hard-headed people.
It really does. I mean, and we all make mistakes, and that's part of what places like the subreddit are for. And that's part of why we're regularly telling people, find a local community. Try to find a tribe, a kindred, a hearth, or whatever the hell they want to call it, to learn from. And it's because you're going to make mistakes like this. And I made my own share of mistakes, and I'm sure that I'm not done making them.
Let's also say that just because you make these mistakes, our beliefs aren't like others where, oh, you've made this grave error and now you're going to go to heathen hell with 2 L's. Not hell in the actual, but like the 2 L. You know, you're going to be banished now and be gone. Because if that were the case, there wouldn't be anybody left.
Yeah, fortunately, you have to do something really supremely stupid to get that treatment.
You know, there's something to be said for a religion that pretty much the worst thing you can do is betray your people. And that's also pretty much the only thing you can do to get a punishment of some sort.
And that's if you even happen to subscribe to one of the versions of heathenry that believes even that.
Exactly. So, I mean, we're not... Again, we're getting back to that whole tribal belief thing of...
Right.
What your people believe is right for your people, and I may say you're doing it wrong, but again, it's what your people believe, and you don't have to take what I have to say about it with any value.
Right. Now, there's a distinction I'd like to make that I believe, just because you never know who's listening, and we can't assume that everybody listening is aware of the same nuances that some of us are, or that we are. Is there is a wrong way to do it. And I think one phrase that has been repeatedly tossed around in discussions on the sub and elsewhere is that there is no right way to heathen, but there are many wrong ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that is largely where our disagreements with different groups come up, is when you're literally doing it wrong. Not to say I'm doing it right, but I can see that you're doing it wrong. It's sort of the thing there.
Now, one thing I have to wonder with that, though, it becomes, when there's so many different ways to do it right, how do you then define this is heathenry and this is Norse-flavored paganism and this is, I often feel like that's a struggle, is to put up that parameter and say, okay, this is heathenry and this is not. I kind of feel like sometimes heathenry is like pornography. I can't really describe it, but I know it when I see it.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that makes that reference.
I had actually never heard that reference before, but now that I have to say it is the most apt description I can think of.
Well, to answer your question, Lauren, how do you know? It really goes back to because you read Culture of the Teutons. That's what it comes down to, though. I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek, is that we try to recognize that we're doing it wrong by understanding the culture of our ancestors. If we are doing something that, in both its form and its spirit, violates the way our ancestors thought, the way our ancestors approached the gods, we're probably doing it wrong, is what I mean to say. And so the more you understand about the way your ancestors believed, the way they structured ritual, et cetera, the better you are going to be at recognizing what is doing it wrong and what is doing it right.
Well, and I think that brings up a valuable point in that we've talked about it on the sub before. The reason reconstruction is such a valuable method, not a denomination,
yes,
but a method, is because what we're trying to do is get as close to what our ancestors did as possible, so that not only do the gods recognize it, but our ancestors, who again are a huge part of heathenry,
Bigger than the
also
gods, even.
recognize it and are able to see that we are striving to bring back that connection, to establish a gift cycle, if you will, between ourselves and them through the use of ritual.
Now, I do have a question, though. That's great on an internal conversation, but how do we explain to people who are not heathen what that means, what being heathen versus not heathen is? That's where I feel like I kind of start running into problems, is trying to express to, and then, kind of to tie into some of the other things we've seen where you have issues like outside recognition of heathenry. How do you even, that I think is one of the hardest things for me, is to be able to say, this is heathenry. And that's why I kind of argue that sometimes the Nine Noble Virtues have a little bit of a place, because sometimes it's a decent little elevator speech.
Well, the problem with, not to launch deep into the problems that I see with the Nine Noble Virtues, I should probably just try and avoid that subject, because that's really not what we're getting at here.
Dead horse.
Yes, dead horse, and it's not what we're trying to approach here. I would say that while those can be valuable as an elevator speech, I think that more valuable than that is to come up with some short, sweet way of pointing out veneration of the ancestors. I mean, honestly, that's a lot of times what I'll go straight to is, oh, we're an ancestor worshiping religion.
Yeah.
And that speaks so many volumes alone. So much is explained by just the concept that we're an ancestor worshiping religion.
I think that's actually a point that gets glossed over by a lot of new and young heathens. We see the posts all the time of which god is my god, or which blah blah blah, and people leave out the fact that we're an ancestor worshiping religion. And to a heathen, honoring, venerating, and worshiping mean the same thing.
Yes.
I mean,
and, go ahead, Lauren.
I mean, the thing is that I would argue, though, 10, 15 years ago, in mainstream heathenry, that was the kind of how it was. I mean, when I came into heathenry, there was a lot of talking between everyone about your patron god and your relationship with God. Totally, to me, that is totally evangelical Christian baggage.
That's right where I was going to go with that. That's exactly when it happened.
As someone who was raised in that you must have a personal relationship with your God culture, I get it. But at the same time, I often feel like that's been probably one of the biggest shifts in heathenry over the past few years, has been that move towards more of an ancestral worshiping culture.
The thing is that people can get that people coming over either directly from Christianity or coming from something other than heathenry that is in the West, because as I've been fond of repeating over and over again, you were raised Christian and so was I, no matter what religion you are, that there is that concept of a personal relationship with God, and we do so much in conversation to try to beat that out of people and say, no, that's not how our gods work, etc., etc. And I honestly think we're taking the wrong path on that. There is a replacement for that personal relationship with God, and that is a personal relationship with your ancestors.
Well, often my general kind of go-to phrase in that is, the gods care about groups, and your ancestors are more invested in you. Just like if you had a problem, your grandma's more likely to come bail you out of jail than some distant cousin.
Right. Well, what I point out to people is, sorry. Well, what I point out to people regularly is that when they talk about, what God do I pray to for this, or how do I develop this relationship with the gods, blah blah, is I'd say, okay, when you have a flat tire, do you call the President of the United States of America, or do you call your Uncle Joe?
Absolutely.
You call your Uncle Joe because the President doesn't know who you are, and in all likelihood, he's never going to get a chance to hear what you had to say in the first place.
That's actually exactly where I was going to go with that.
Sorry, Josh.
I'm a little disappointed I didn't get to give my spiel. Sad day.
Would you like to? It can be said more than once.
No, I don't need to beat dead horse more than once.
Well, the moment's passed.
Well, and that is where I can, not to be a judgmental person, but I am. I can tell how mature someone's heathenry is based on that conversation. If they immediately want to try to come in and do like a one-for-one swap with Greek and Roman gods, or they want this, no, that doesn't mean that if there aren't on big issues that you might want to, call the president. But, I can tell when somebody's trivial or day-to-day issues, they want to go directly to the gods instead of working with their land spirits and their ancestors and their house spirits. To me, that screams noob.
Well, yeah, and it screams noob because it is noob. I mean, and there's another subject that's sort of secondary, possibly tertiary to this that I'd like to hit on. It actually kind of takes us in an entirely different direction, so maybe I shouldn't.
Go ahead.
Well, it kind of extends into the noob territory. It also extends into...
I think you're going to have to speak up a little bit there, Torrin. I mean, I can't turn your mic up anymore, so...
I'm sorry. Let me see if I can turn it up a little bit, if that helps at all. Doing my best, I promise. It's a used microphone I picked up from the friend. Let me gather my thoughts for a second. Okay, that's where I was going. So we talk a lot about Christian baggage, which is absolutely a thing that every single person born in the West is going to come to this religion with Christian baggage. If your parents were heathen and they raised you heathen, you're coming into it with Christian baggage because the overculture is Christian. But the thing is, you're also going to come into heathenry with baggage from whatever other subculture you were a part of before you found it. And one of the biggest ones is general eclectic paganism, or Wicca, with good reason, because a lot of people start getting drawn towards the concept of pagan religion. And that's where they go first because they're the biggest. They're the ones that everybody knows about. They're the ones that have had countless movies about goth witches in the 90s made about them.
Let's be honest. If you go to Barnes & Noble or whatever bookstore you happen to have there, and you look in the religion section, you might have Diana Paxson's The Central Asatru. You might have Asatru for beginners. You might have Rites of Odin. But there are shelves and shelves and shelves of general neo-pagan and Wiccan books.
Absolutely. And honestly, neo-paganism or eclectic paganism end up oftentimes becoming paths not just to heathenry, but ultimately paths to a number of other specific pagan religions. Because, like we said, that's where you go first. It's what you see first. But as a result of that, people are going to come at it with that baggage. And one of the biggest bits of baggage that I see coming from Wicca or eclectic paganism is the baggage of magic. I have lost count of the number of posts on our sub or Facebook groups or whatnot that a person says, "Hi, I'm new to heathenry or Asatru, and I came here from this, and I want to know about how to do magic with the runes, or how do I do Sather, or any of this other stuff. What book can you turn me to that's going to teach me this?" And it's just something that this was a thought that just sort of bouncing around in my head because of our earlier conversations that I wanted to address in this format as well, is that no. Just no. That is not where you go first.
Cultural context.
Exactly.
You gotta have that cultural context.
Well, to bring us back around earlier to the subject of the cultural appropriation and the negative heathen reaction that there often is to it, one of the big ones on that tends to be the runes, because they are the single biggest element of heathenry that is appropriated by other neo-pagan religions.
And I laugh. We actually had a mini pagan festival here that I was involved with helping run, and I invited a friend of mine who's heathen, who specifically is Asatru, who is writes a lot, and so he has a kind of well known for giving talks on different things, asking to talk about the runes. So he comes in and does a whole hour presentation on how they were used as a written form of communication. It was great.
That is fantastic. Well, you know, I can say that there's debate even in the heathen community about how much magic there ever was in the runes.
The idea that you can write something down and preserve it. I'm sorry, that's freaking magic.
Yeah, you can preserve knowledge and pass it on to your descendants without ever speaking. You can write something down.
I always thought that was the true magic of the runes, was the fact that, you know, Sven could write a message to Bjorn and have it delivered by ship and not have it corrupted.
Yeah.
Right, and I'd say that's probably the biggest magic of the runes. And whether or not there's any other magic in them is probably a subject for another episode.
Right.
But that just brings me around to the idea that if you are new to this and you're listening to this podcast, you can absolutely ask the question about various forms of heathen magic, but you need to understand a few things. The first being that we might be one of the oddballs out on the various pagan religions in the fact that there's a good chance that about, I'd say 95% of every heathen you will ever meet in your life will go through his entire life without coming anywhere near anything that approaches magic. It's not important to our religion.
Well, even if you look back, a village might have a wise woman, someone who practiced faith, but it was one person in the entire village. You know, it wasn't everyone, you know, every mother taught their daughter, which is what some people try to make it, and that's completely not true. What they might have even seen as necessarily magic, we would take more for granted as science or medicine.
Right.
I mean, you know, I have a copy of the Icelandic charms that was translated by Ben Wagner a couple of years ago, and I enjoy reading those because I think that's fascinating. But it really does come closer to medicine than it does to magic.
Absolutely.
Well, I was looking into a lot of the Anglo-Saxon Calder charms, and one of the things that I noticed was that, for instance, in the nine herbs charm, you have these herbs that they're using, and when you look into the science of it, they are medicinal. That is their purpose. It's not just magic. The magic is there, but it's calling on the ancestors for help. It's calling on the gods for help in curing whatever is ailing this person, and the herbs are there to do their job.
The knowledge that we have, or that person had from their ancestors, that to me is the magic. That's the one that would say, well, you know, I have this knowledge that this particular herb will cure the fever or whatever.
Right, and that's some of it. And I don't dispute the idea that at least among some tribes there were more esoteric magical concepts going around with heathens. But it's one of those things every time that I've ever been asked, well, how do you learn this? You know, what book can I go to learn this stuff? My answer has always been the same. And in fact, this answer has led to a meeting I'm getting ready to have on Friday. I say to them, well, your first step is to find other local heathens in your community. Once you've done that, find out if there is a group of local heathens in your community, say a kindred or a tribe or a hearth or whatever they choose to call themselves. Make friends with these people. If they like you and you like them, consider joining their tribe. If that works out for you and you've been with them for a while and they've decided that you have worth, and one of them that might know something about this happens to decide that you are somebody that's worth teaching it to, then maybe you'll learn it. This is not something you pick up a book and learn about.
Well, I know a fair bit about how Saith is taught in America, at least. And it's very much, you know, there are very few people that actually are what I consider really practicing it, like really, really practicing it. But it's a situation where if you want to learn it, you've got to put forth the investment of traveling to wherever these people are and being deemed somebody they want to teach. And I mean, in a way, it kind of reminds me of, to some degree, some of the, it's a very esoteric society. It's exactly like that. It's something that has to be taught face to face. You cannot teach something like that in a book or over the internet.
Well, right. Even trusted friends of mine that have asked to learn certain things that I know, I just tell them, not unless you decide to move to where I am.
Well, and there's, that comes down to when people come in and they want to, actually, Laura and I, we have talked about this before, doing a Havamal thing without a cultural understanding of what you're getting into, whether it's whether it's full Trui or the Havamal or Bind Runes or Seither or any of that, without a cultural understanding, you won't get it. You will have book knowledge, and that is it. Neil Price is one of my favorite scholars when it comes to the Viking period, and yet, because he is not a heathen and he doesn't have the cultural understanding, all he has is book knowledge. He doesn't have a visceral grasp of what these things mean to someone who lives in that.
Exactly.
It's absolutely the heart of it.
Well, I mean, to me, it's, to put it in a more kind of general pagan sense, it's like trying to learn tarot from a book without actually getting a tarot deck. You can learn all these scholarly meanings, but if you've never seen a picture of what they look like, that's the point for it, without seeing a picture even. You can, there's really no, it's just, and you know what, I am guilty of a whole lot of book learning and not as many experiences around other heathens. That, I admit that. That's one of the flaws in my practice, is that most of my knowledge does come from reading and from online interaction versus being around other heathens.
Well, and it's not to say that you can't learn things that way. Like, I have learned more about the Viking period from Neil Price lectures on YouTube than Torrin could ever teach me if he were a Viking scholar.
No, I'm really good about 1066, but other than that, I'm barely average.
That's about where my knowledge ends as well. But at the same time, with my kinfolk, we have a visceral knowledge of our traditions and our methods that really does go beyond the online learnings I can do from, whether it's on the subreddit or the study groups on Facebook. I just can't learn what it is to be a heathen. I can learn what it looks like to be a heathen online.
Well, I mean, that's why we would drive 3 hours to go hang out with other heathens and have a weekend together, because that is really just, I can read about a bloat all I want, I can watch a video of a bloat, but until I actually participate in one, I don't get it fully.
Right, and honestly, we shouldn't balk too much driving 3 hours to go see some heathens when there was a time for our ancestors when that might have been how long you walked to go see your neighbor.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I don't do much driving anymore. It's the darndest thing. You start going blind, and they take your driver's license from you. I don't know what's up with that.
I thought this was America.
America!
If you can't drive blind, then you are not free.
Exactly.
I really hope someone steals that and makes it a soundbite. I want to see it on Fox News. I mean, that would be the pinnacle.
Oh, God. That's it. All these crazy pagans are saying that we should allow blind people to drive.
You should have seen them when colleges started making posts about pagan holidays. It was fantastic.
Well, as far as the blind people being able to drive, in our defense, they're the ones that started that Jesus take the wheel crap.
Well, and it can't be helped that my guardian angel may have a name, whereas theirs is just some dude with wings.
Man. But yeah, totally. I mean, we complain about our modern life, and we, oh man, I have to drive 3 hours to go see heathens or this, that, and the other. And our lives are so easy compared to what they could be, none of us have ever had to plow a field. Well, I haven't, and I'm assuming you guys have never, tried to plow a field with horses.
No, I had to do it with a damn shovel.
I've done my share of, 1 or 2 acre gardening, but that's about as difficult as it got. Maybe fixing a fence or helping horses do the deed. That's not a fun job. Don't do that one.
No. But yeah, the idea is, we take for granted how we have the internet to connect with people, and not only do the kind of proto-heathens never had that kind of, they didn't have mail service like we do. I mean, even our more revivalist heathen ancestors didn't have that ability. I mean, I just think that's amazing.
Right. I will have to say, though, honestly, any of that sort of farm-type work I've ever done had absolutely nothing to do with heathenry and everything to do with living in a rural area for a while. And unfortunately, very little of that was on my own property. That was, go help the neighbor, boy.
My first job was working for an ex-girlfriend's dad on a ranch/kennel. And I cleaned horse stalls, I held reins while the horses mated, I fixed fences, I did all sorts of things. I babysat dogs after, they gave birth, all sorts of fun stuff. And again, nothing to do with heathenry. Just like we get those posts every once in a while about lifting and physical fitness being part of your praxis.
Okay, I'm arguing with you on this one. Oh man, because to me, and you can see right now, I don't appear to be the most physically fit person in the world, but man, to me, my physical fitness has become important to me because of heathenry, because of the idea that I want to be worth something. I don't want to be a burden on my family. I want to be able to contribute. And I think physical fitness as a tenet of heathenry is not necessarily good. I think that there's definitely something to it being part of your practice.
Well,
I also lift.
Do you even lift?
Do you even lift?
The blind can speak, the lame can ride a horse, yada, yada, yada.
Do you know how many times I post that on Facebook?
Quote the Icelanders.
Hey, they may do it wrong, but every once in a while they get something right.
Whether it's by accident or not.
My point with the making physical fitness part of your practice, I do MMA. I was going quite a bit, and now, due to scheduling, I go less. I don't go as part of some worshipful experience. I go because I want to get in shape. I want to lose weight. I don't want to be a burden on people.
Well,
I also want to feel good about myself, and that's why I do it.
I mean, for my part, I'm a blacksmith by hobby, and I don't do that because of some weird religious thing where I want to devote to the dwarves or something. I do it because it's fun, and it's one of the only ways that I've been able to make art and hit stuff at the same time. And, I'm a mechanic by trade, and I work on a lot of big equipment. I lift a lot of heavy things, and it's not a fitness routine. It's me being valuable. It's me providing for my family. And There's the whole thing about how, our ancestors were much more physically fit because of the farm labor and blah, blah, and this and that and so on and so forth, when really what it came down to is they weren't doing it out of some queer devotion to the gods. They were doing it because that was the way they provided for their family.
Also, they died younger.
Yeah,
there were more accidents. I mean, let's be completely honest. There were more hazards.
There were more hazards, but at the same time, I go to work 8 hours a day, 40 days a week. Not because the gods demand I go to work, not because my ancestors demand I go to work, but because if I don't go to work 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, I don't pay the bills and I'm homeless. And if I'm homeless, I'm worthless to my folk.
Now, I will say this. There is nothing wrong, I think, though, that if you genuinely see what you're doing, there are some people that embrace everything in their life. Their life is a spiritual practice. And I don't necessarily think if you see that, well, I go to my job and I provide for my family and there's some sort of deeper meaning on that for you, knock yourself out.
Well, from a religious point of view, there is a deeper meaning to that. The concept of providing for your family and providing worth to your folk is absolutely at its core a religious concept for us. So there definitely is, if you want to really twist it in that direction, a religious devotion involved for a heathen to show up to a shitty job 5 days a week and work in some soul-crushing place and try to take home a paycheck. They're doing it because they need to provide for their folk and provide worth. So
I think where the big difference is, and where you get away from the baggage portion of it, is I go to work at a job that sometimes is good, sometimes is bad. It's a work. It's work. It's a job. I go because I have to pay the bills. I have to have worth to my people. I don't go because someone wrote down in a book somewhere, "Thou must worketh 40th hours a weeketh." That's not why I go.
Well, but that's really the big part of heathenry. There's really no dogmatic "thou shalt" absolutely. If you want to be heathen, thou must wear a Thor's hammer. Women must not cut their hair. Oh, that's an argument among heathen ladies you don't ever want to get in the middle of. The women who think that
that was an argument.
Oh,
there's an argument about anybody cutting their hair.
Yes, because I'm a woman with short hair, and I'm not gonna. My hair has been long. I'm not doing it again. It's too thick, too heavy. But there are people who immediately say that I am placing myself as in the position of a thrall and being a bad heathen for cutting my hair. And I'm like, geez, I feel like I'm back in church, because that's the kind of argument they would make about women cutting their hair in more more conservative Christian circles.
Well, honestly, if you ever want to shut them down quickly, Lauren, the best answer is that, assuming that you are talking about one of those places where that was a thing, because that was hardly universal across all heathen tribes.
Exactly.
But if you are talking about one of the places where that was a thing, it wasn't the short hair itself that was a sign of thraldom or slavery. It was the lack of choice.
Yes.
It was that it was deemed that your hair was going to be cut for you because that is what your owner decided to do. Because you had no work. So, them trying to say that you need to have your hair long because short hair is a mark of a slave is them essentially trying to steal your work from you.
Exactly, and that, I think, the whole conversation that we've had tonight, starting with Iceland and kind of meandering through all the places that we've gone, really comes back to that is when you try to say to someone your tribe is doing it wrong and I'm going to go show you how to do it right, or you try to dominate over them, you are in a sense saying that their worth is less. Right. And that...
Well, and you have no claim on their worth. That's exactly the important bit.
And that's the really awkward part about it, is if you're trying to make a claim on your worth and you have no claim on that.
You got to speak up, Torin. We can't.
I'm sorry. I think that's where it becomes awkward for those people, or at least awkward for those of us watching it in kind of a, oh, bless your heart sort of way, is that they're trying to make a claim that they have no right to make. As they are trying to lay claim to somebody else's worth without having claim on that worth. And in fact, I would even say damaging their own worth in the cause.
And that really is what it comes down to me, whether you have, like we're talking about, people who are sending hate mail to these Icelandic groups, or you have your you must be of this particular genetic line to be heathen, or all of it just comes down to the same thing, is that you have no place to tell me.
Right.
And that's really, I think why you have kind of a visceral response sometimes is because you know that immediately that feels like an insult on you, and I mean that in the most like literal kind of sense.
Well, it's no. I would say it absolutely is an insult for them to try and do something like that to you over any subject, whether it be these jackasses that are doing this over the temple, or even down to the simple things like people telling you you need to grow your hair out. Is they are trying to imply that you are worthless, and these same people are trying to imply that the Icelanders in their temple are worthless. And when it comes down to it, they have no claim on that work.
I think this comes down to the fact that one of the biggest points of baggage that affects the heathen world, we'll call it, is this idea of global community. The Christians have global community. Whether you're a Protestant in America or a Catholic in America, you still call each other sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
Depending on where you're a Christian.
Whether you're a Baptist in America or a Methodist in America.
Or a Southern Baptist versus the
exactly.
regular
Baptist. As long as you're Protestant, it's all good.
But to get to that point is there's this idea of all heathens must heathen the same that seems to pervade the online community, in that they think, whether it's people who are universalist or folkish or tribalist, they think that everybody must do things my way because my way is the heathen way versus my way is the heathen way and his way is the heathen way, and they're different, but they look kind of close to similar.
Well, and I think that all comes back to the same topic of, Christian baggage. And we could probably do a whole show on the concept of family bonds and how the overculture comes from a Christian culture of trying to break the family bond down and replace it with the religious bond.
Oh yeah.
And so people coming from that, they're looking for that overarching organization. They all deep down inside, until they get away from it and figure out how to educate themselves out of it, deep down inside they're all looking for an ossipode. And while that happens to be me, I don't expect any of you to listen to me.
Unless you have a pointy hat, you don't get to claim the title. I'm sorry.
I do.
Pixar didn't happen.
I feel like I need to say Dan O'Halloran at this point just to trigger a few people. I don't know why. I just feel like I need to say it.
Hey, watch it. Trigger is my trigger.
That's my line. You stole that from me.
The trigger warnings have no place on this podcast. This is not a trigger warning. This is just me poking you in the side.
Oh, man. Oh. So, guys, we've been on here we've been at this for our time, so kind of want to wrap up. It's been a really great conversation that we've been able to kind of really, it all comes back to worth. And there'll be links up to some of the books we've talked about in the show notes, as well as links to Esoteric on Reddit, so you can come over there and see just how interesting it gets sometimes.
And tell us how we're doing it wrong.
Exactly. Because just remember, you're not the boss of me.
I do want to reiterate, we are still trying to find someone to put together a awesome banner for our Google Plus and YouTube page, as well as our Facebook. We've had
Twitter.
And Twitter. Forgot about Twitter. And we've had one submission so far for intro and outro music. Unfortunately, not on the live cast this time. We're still figuring out the Google Plus thing. But if you are a musician,
to edit the voiceover onto it. But yeah.
And there you go. If you are a musician or digital artist or something and you want a prize of some sort, whether it's a gift card to Amazon or I'll say your name on the podcast, I don't care. Send your submissions in to our Facebook, which is facebook.com/Heathen Talk.
I will give you this lovely book on Freya. See, it's right here.
That's a pretty awesome book.
There we go. It is.
Hey, you know, maybe we could get Thorbjorn to play us the banjo.
That would be
But he's
awesome.
actually the submission we've had, and I got to be honest, I would hate to give it to him on a technicality. I don't think that's the kind of victory he wants.
I did not realize he had submitted. I'll have to listen to that.
But like I said, submit something. Let us know that you're listening. I know the most viewers we've had on this live cast is 9, so the 9 of you are pretty freaking awesome.
Hey, we had 174 downloads of the podcast last week.
Hey, that's pretty fantastic for the first one.
I'm very excited about it. So seriously, guys, feedback on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or Reddit, or you can email us heathen.talk.podcast@gmail. Please tell us how we're doing it wrong. We like to hear this from you. And I appreciate the constructive criticism we have gotten. It's actually been very helpful.
And I'll say for my part, whether it be on Reddit or on Facebook, I personally refuse to pimp Twitter. Give us suggestions for things that we should talk about. We kind of flew by the seat of our pants on this one today. Our main subject kind of got tossed out the window. Unfortunately, our guest was unable to make it. But if you guys have things that you'd like to hear us get into, or topics you'd like us to cover, just give a suggestion and we'll put it on the docket and try to come up with a slightly more organized show next time.
Or people you want us to talk to, authors, whatever. I'm really, really trying to get a couple of people so that we can maybe talk to some scholars, not even necessarily, but people who are working in the more scholarly end of this. Maybe they can dumb it down for me.
First person to mention Dan O'Halloran gets banned. Just saying it.
I don't think that he can do an interview from jail. That's all I'm saying.
DMX recorded a whole album from prison.
Yeah, but I'm not going to pay the... Do you know how much jail phone calls cost? I'm not going to pay that.
Hey, well, you know what? I'll pay that money, even international, if I get a chance to tell Barbara Karnas that he's an idiot.
All right, it's 8:31.
Yeah,
We've been on here for an hour and a half. Just remember, you're doing it wrong, and you're not the boss of me.
See y'all next week.